In 2020, we live in a world where a 20, 10, and 8 game for LeBron James is considered a bad game. NBA stars are held to the highest standard when it comes to performance. 82 games in a season, 16 potential playoff games, and they're expected to perform at an elite level in each and every single one of them. However, it doesn't always go that way. Everybody has off nights. Whether you play basketball, football, or do something completely different, every single person in the world can have days where they just don't have it. Whether it be from a lack of focus, lack of rest, or simply just being off rhythm, it happens to the best of us. We know James Harden to be one of the most lethal and unstoppable scorers in this era of basketball, who is capable of putting up stat lines like this on a daily basis. But as I'm sure we all know too well, he is also capable of putting up stat lines like this fairly often. Every player has bad games. No star, not even Michael Jordan or LeBron James, are exempt from them. So, what are the worst games ever played by NBA stars? Well, let's go back to that James Harden stat line for another moment. Although inefficient, this is not James Harden's worst game ever played. Before I discuss the worst games ever played by NBA stars, I need to explain to you what I'll be using to determine this, a statistic known as game score. So, what is game score? Game score was created by John Hollinger in the early 2000s and encompasses everything a player does in a game. If it is a recorded stat, game score takes it into consideration. From field goal attempts and makes to turnovers and fouls, game score looks at everything. For reference, an average game score is 10, a good game score is 20, and a great game score is 30. With that being said, there are obviously some things that game score does not and cannot reflect. A game-winning jumper is more significant than the jumper in the middle of the second quarter. But in terms of game score, both hold equal value. So, although it doesn't tell us how well or how poorly a player played overall, it does show us how they perform statistically, so we'll just be looking at it from that perspective. Before I dive deeper into this, I want to make sure I set some rules. In order to avoid skewed stat lines, I made sure I searched for games where each star player played at least a minimum of 20 minutes in order to find their worst game score. I did this in order to avoid bad stat lines that could have resulted because of a lack of playing time and not because of a lack of actual production. Now, let's get back to James Harden. If the stat line I showed you previously wasn't James Harden's worst game of all time, then what was? Well, back when he was still a rookie playing for the Thunder, coming off the bench, on a game on April 7th versus the Denver Nuggets, James Harden had 2 points on 1 of 7 shooting with 1 rebound, 1 block, 1 turnover, and 21 minutes. This resulted in a game score of -3.3. For comparison, the box score I showed you earlier gave James Harden a game score of 1.2. But okay, you're saying maybe that's not fair. He's a rookie. He's coming off the bench. He's not the player we know today. Okay, and to that I say, you may have a fair point. So I'll show you this one. After a 45-point performance in Game 4 of the 2015 Western Conference Finals, maybe the best game of his career up to that point, James Harden followed up with a 14-point, 12-turnover stinker in an elimination game. That's absurd. I mean, the Rockets had no chance in the series, but he basically undid all the good he had done in the previous 4 games. Can you guess what his game score was for that game? A whopping 1. Yes, James Harden put up a whopping game score of 1 in a Western Conference Finals elimination game. Yeah, probably not his proudest moment. But that's enough James Harden slander for today. So let's look at his arch nemesis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, a man who was known and prided himself on his efficiency. What was Giannis's worst game as a pro? Well, in his second season in the NBA, he had a game against the Detroit Pistons in November where he put up 2 points on 1 of 13 shooting with 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and 3 turnovers. He ended the game with a game score of -6.3. Just to put this into perspective, Giannis, one of the most efficient and dominant players in the game today, shot 7% from the field. 7%. And the craziest thing is, he played 30 minutes this game. But wait till you hear this. The most amazing part of the game is that the Bucks somehow managed to win this game 98-86 against the Detroit Pistons behind Brandon Knight's 20 points. Yeah, 2014 was a weird time for the Milwaukee Bucks. But Giannis is a 2-time MVP and current Defensive Player of the Year who had to develop when he came into the league. He had a lot of growing pains, as raw prospects do, and he definitely struggled at the beginning of his career. So let's switch our focus to a man who is notorious for his poor performances, Paul George. What was Playoff P's worst game of his career? Well, to some of your surprises, it actually came when he was on the Indiana Pacers. On a game in March of 2014 versus Charlotte, he put up 2 points on 9 of 7 shooting with 7 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, and 5 turnovers in 34 minutes of play. This gave him a game score of -6.2. Slightly better than Giannis's -6.3. And although it's a bad game, I'm sure some of you are disappointed that I didn't mention a game more recently. Do you want to know what one of Paul George's top 5 worst games in his career was? It came this season. On November 29th, against the San Antonio Spurs, he put up 5 points with 2 fouls, 5 turnovers, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists. He also shot 2 for 11. This gave him a game score of -2.8. But I would be selling y'all short if I didn't mention a playoff game, which got him the infamous Playoff P nickname. I'm sure we all know the game I'm referring to, but let me refresh your memory. In the 2018 playoffs, in a Game 6 elimination game against the Utah Jazz, Paul George put up 5 points with 8 assists, 3 rebounds, while adding in 3 fouls and 6 turnovers, shooting 2 of 16 from the field. 2 of 16. That's 12%. He didn't hit a single three-pointer. 0 of 6. This stat line resulted in him getting a game score of -5.5. -5.5 in a playoff game. As you'll see later in this list, some stars haven't had a game score that bad in their entire careers. Yeah, when you play like that in the biggest moments, you're gonna get criticized. But that's enough about Paul George. He's still one of the better players in the NBA and was a top 3 MVP and Defensive Player of the Year candidate just 2 seasons ago. So let's take a look at his former teammate, Russell Westbrook. Now, Russell Westbrook is a player known to put up huge stat lines. And although he's extremely inefficient at times and could be a liability on the court offensively, he always gets his numbers. And when I took a look at his games, a couple things surprised me. Maybe they didn't surprise you. Russell Westbrook's worst game of all time came in November of 2009 against the Clippers, where he put up 2 points on 1 of 11 shooting with only 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 turnovers in 22 minutes for a -5.4 game score. The reason this was easily one of Russell Westbrook's worst games is because he didn't have the assists or rebounds to up his game score. When I was looking through the box scores of some of his other games, he definitely had some pretty bad performances. There would be games where he put up 9 points and 11 turnovers, but the fact that he had 11 or 13 rebounds in each of those games boosted his game score significantly. So because of that, none of them really came close to the -5.4 game score he received from this game in 2009. However, I did find this game from the 2014-2015 regular season where he received a -4 game score. In this game, he put up 10 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, as well as 7 turnovers and 4 fouls. He shot 3 of 19 from the field, which is 16%, and had a plus-minus of -23. As bad as this game was, if you just looked at the stats without the efficiencies, 10, 7, and 4, doesn't seem like the worst game. Now, we all know Russell Westbrook isn't the most efficient or dominant player in the league today, but I can tell you one thing, his numbers are on another level. Now, one of the more interesting stat lines I found while doing this research came from Damian Lillard on a game in 2015 versus the LA Clippers. Some of you may remember this game. Damian Lillard put up 5 points on 1 of 13 shooting, but with 18 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 turnovers in 43 minutes for a game score of -2.1. The reason I'm saying some of you may remember this game was because this famous play happened.
Turkoglu right in front of the Portland bench, getting no encouragement from that group. Clippers have a timeout left.
And Christian, tell him shoot it!
Yeah, a big man with an open layup who just couldn't get the ball in the basket. Speaking of big men who couldn't get the ball in the basket, let's talk about why I made this video. And that's because of Joel Embiid. You see, when I was researching game score and the worst games by NBA superstars, the inspiration for it came from one specific game from Joel Embiid. And this actually happened this previous season. A lot of you may remember it. On November 25th, 2019 versus the Toronto Raptors, Joel Embiid put up 0 points. You heard me correctly. 0 points on 0 of 11 shooting with 13 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 turnovers, and 32 whole minutes of play. This was by far, and I mean by far, the worst game score I could find. With a -8.4 game score, he had a difference of 2.1. 2.1 between him and the next closest, which was Giannis in 2014. Look, JoJo, I like you, but this was inexcusable. You gotta be better, bro. Okay, now let's get to the reason that 99.9% of you are here. One of your GOATs has a lower game score than the other. I'm talking about LeBron James and Michael Jordan. The two players who people constantly argue and bicker about being the greatest of all time. Which one of them played a worse game than the other? Well, to most of your pleasures, both of these guys have been very, very close to having a positive game score actually be their worst game ever played. The 2008 Eastern Conference semifinals pitted two of the best teams in the league against each other. LeBron's Cavs versus the Big Three Boston Celtics. LeBron's worst game ever came in this series versus the eventual NBA champion Boston Celtics, where he put up 12 points on 12 of 18 shooting with 9 rebounds, 9 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, and 10 turnovers in 39 minutes of play. This resulted in a -0.7 game score for LeBron James, being the worst game of his career. The fact that the worst game this man has played over the 17 seasons he's been in the league had a -0.7 game score is astonishing. Not to mention, he put up 12, 9, and 9 in this game regardless. But Michael Jordan slightly gets the edge. In a game against the Milwaukee Bucks on December 13th of 1986, Michael Jordan put up 11 points with 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block, 2 turnovers, and 2 fouls, shooting 3 of 17 from the field. This resulted in him getting a -0.4 game score, only 0.3 points higher than LeBron's. Now, the crazy thing is, I was looking at Michael Jordan's playoff game scores to see which one most closely resembles Bron's 2008 conference semifinals game. And to my amazement, MJ never had a game score lower than 6.4 in the playoffs. That's not an incredible number or anything, but the fact that he was able to be 6 points above positive or more in every single playoff game of his career is absolutely amazing. But regardless of how you feel about both these players, The fact that neither of them have ever played in an NBA game where they got lower than a -1 game score is truly astounding. Just goes to show how great these two are. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bow!